Many, many years ago, there was a Chinese farmer who had a very prized possession. It was his horse. And people from all over the country, including his neighbors, would come over often to look at that horse and say, "What a blessed man you are. How envious that we are that you have that type of horse." And they would say, "You are so lucky, you are so blessed." To which the Chinese farmer would reply, "Who is to say what is good and what is bad?" In bewilderment and a little bit puzzled, the neighbors would return home and say, "What is this guy talking about?" A few days later, this prized man's horse runs away from the barn. And the neighbors go over and say, "We are sorry, we offer our condolences. We're sorry that you experienced such a loss." To which the Chinese farmer replied, "Who is to say what is good and what is bad?" The following week, his prized horse returns back home to the farm to the Chinese farmer, and along with that horse, the horse brings another horse. So now there's two horses. The neighbors come over and say, "Wow, that's awesome. What a turn of events. You are a blessed man indeed. You started with one horse and now you have two horses. What a tremendous turn of events. How fortunate you are." To which the Chinese farmer replied, "Who is to say what is good and what is bad?" The following week, the Chinese farmer's son, while practicing on the horse and riding the horse, falls down and unfortunately breaks his leg. The neighbors come over and say, "We are sorry that you experienced this tragedy. We're sorry for, again, the turn of events." To which the Chinese farmer replied, "Who is to say what is good and what is bad?" 1 month later, while the son's healing from his broken leg, the entire country goes into war, and every young man who is able, who is fit, is drafted into the war, except his son. And everybody in the war experiences catastrophic losses and dies. And so often, like this neighbor, like these neighbors, we often see time and we see a turn of events only in snapshots. We fail to realize that time is not just a static, sequential thing, but in fact, time in our lives are multidimensional, and we experience it in a very, very dynamic way. And see, too often when we get discouraged, we see ourselves as failures because we do not accomplish certain things within a time frame. We do not accomplish certain things to the level of our desire or our blueprint. In reality, what we call failure is really just results in a snapshot of time. In other words, there's no such thing as failure. Only time that you are a failure, that any time that a person is a failure, is if he or she decides to stay that way. We can't be failures unless we decide to stay that way. Everybody's going to get knocked down. Everybody's going to get disappointed. Everybody's going to have things in life not go their way. But we will only remain down and feeling like a failure if we choose to do so. And likewise, many people who are successful, quote unquote successful, it gets into their mind and they think that they've made it and they've achieved it, the ultimate success, only to fail to realize that success is a lifelong process. Success is a journey. And so we don't ever reach success, but we can take steps towards success and we can celebrate the successful milestones in our lives. Anytime that we see time as merely a snapshot, a reference, a collection point that we point to on and off, it creates problems. For example, if you are feeling miserable right now, or if you're feeling depressed, chances are you are feeling miserable because you are living in a past. You are choosing to focus on a focal point, at a snapshot of time in the past. And if you're feeling anxious today, most likely you're focusing on a snapshot of what a certain event or a certain outcome in the future. Instead, when we are currently in the moment, when we're present, when we're centered, and we're enjoying the exact present moment that we are, there's no misery, there's no anxiety, there's no stress, there's no depression. Because fear is the oscillation of the past and the present. If you think about it, any time that you're fearful, we are oscillating, we are going back and forth between the past and the future. If your past was better than your current circumstances, you're going to want to tend to live in the past. If your past was horrible, you're going to want to tend to focus upon the future. And it's this oscillation going back and forth between what happened to us in the past and what could potentially happen to us in the future is what creates fear. Fear is based off of a sense of loss. Loss of something that could happen in the future, and loss of something that can no longer sustain and no longer continue its pattern in the past. And so when we realize that and we can live in the present, we can live in the moment, fear dissipates. Fear disappears when we are currently in the moment and we live by faith and we acknowledge that there's something greater, that we're guided, and that we're not just a mere circumstance of events, and that we don't focus on one aspect of our lives, but we look at it from the continuum. We look at it from a higher perspective, not just what's happening to us currently in our lives, but what is about to happen overall. And just like this Chinese farmer, we can see the big perspective, because when we determine, who's to determine what is good and what is bad? It's us. And that is the secret, is when we realize who is to determine what is good and wrong, or what is good and bad in the current circumstances of our lives. We have the power to dictate that based on our focus, based on our perspective, based on our meanings. And that would empower us towards growth. That would empower us towards something substantial. That would empower us to do something that's awesome, that's worthwhile, that's God intended. So my encouragement for us today is, don't look upon the past and get stuck there. Don't look upon the future and get stuck there. Live in the present moment and experience the beauty and the blessedness of everything that we have in this moment. God bless.